Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, November 23rd, 2022. Time for our pre-Thanksgiving show. And we'll do it live today, despite the fact that, everything in the world is falling apart. And there's plenty that we could be doing. The World Cup is being played. I don't know if we're supposed to be watching it or whether we're boycotting it or not, but I see plenty of discussion on it on Twitter, so I guess some people are breaking whatever boycott there may have been, simply because it's being hosted by a repressive regime, internationally reviled for X number of reasons. But you know how that goes. There's plenty of other things happening today. I don't know what any of them are. It's a bit disjointed today. No school, so that's good news. And maybe not quite as much clanging and knocking and pinging in the background as I thought we were going to have today, as the schedule has changed a little bit. Tomorrow, of course, will be perhaps an impossible show. Friday as well, I know already we're off the air. And Greg Dworkin, of course, has plenty going on at home today as well. Unlikely to be able to join us, but in case something breaks through for him, and he just has to have a moment to come by or just feels like it, coming by and sharing a few stories or critiquing ones we brought forward or praising them to the heavens. Who knows what might happen. Plenty to cover today. No set plan as ever. I mean, it's the way we approach almost everything. But we are once again, as I said yesterday, we're under the cloud of a mass shooting. But this time I mean a different mass shooting. You see, as has been pointed out numerous times in various social media platforms, we haven't had a chance to bury the victims of the previous mass shooting before we have a new one. This one looked like it might have turned out worse last night, but apparently not quite as bad as feared yesterday. But mass shooting in a Walmart, I mean, there's nothing more American than that, and it's almost Thanksgiving time, so, perfect timing. It struck me last night that, the shooting in the Walmart, I found it interesting that there was so much discussion yesterday of the shooting at the club, is it Club Q? Is that the name of the place in Colorado Springs? That it was discussed by a number of people interviewed in the stories and offering commentary afterward that this was particularly egregious because it was a shooting in the safe space that they had attempted to create for themselves for the LGBTQ community in the area, and that this was particularly egregious violation of that. But, of course, it only took a couple of days, by the way, for there to emerge. I mean, they always were there, but I guess to get back into the act for the right-wing figures who actually had, support for and praise for the shooting, by the way. I did happen to see people whom I almost never come across in my daily life, thankfully, but I think Tim Pool is the name of the guy behind the account on the Bird site, who basically, I think he seems to have taken the lead on the right wing, the response to the shooting after they, all mouth the thoughts and prayers. This gang came back and said, well, they were holding a quote unquote grooming event because, of course, there were gay people at this thing. There were people, who are otherwise oriented at this event. And so therefore, and of course, the target of the moment, drag performers. And I mean, I guess I just wanted you to know, in case you didn't. I mean, you'll find it upsetting, no doubt, if you didn't know it. Sorry, but welcome to the world. But these people believe that while it's always, disturbing that things have to come to violence, they like to sometimes preface these things. They just said, this guy said, we ought not to be tolerating these quote unquote grooming events where pedophiles groom and prey on children, which is not at all what was happening at this event. nor is it anything at all that happens at any kind of an event. It happens, and it's a crime when it does happen, and that's why there's no events for it, because you would get caught in the middle of a crime. But their view of it is, well, somebody had to do something because the police won't act and politicians won't act, and so therefore we have to. And it has already sparked about the reaction that I guess I figured it would have to eventually. I saw someone sharing pictures yesterday of, and I don't know where, maybe I can check back. The bird site has become particularly difficult for me to use of late for a number of reasons. But the physical reason for it is that TweetDeck, apparently, maybe TweetDeck is finally dead. I think that was a threat for a long time that, once the Elon Musk ownership rumors began to circulate that he was going to, because I thought, I think that long time plans for the original ownership of Twitter was to try to get rid of TweetDeck, because I guess they don't own it, and they didn't want anybody using anything that they didn't own ever. And Elon Musk is only, like that worldview on steroids, and maybe they finally shut it down. And that's the only way I truly find the bird site useful during the show, because it has the constantly refreshing display, although it's been getting worse and worse lately. But, and it has all the columns, and it's organizable, and it's something I can view at a glance. Whereas the native web interface for the bird site is static and displays only one column at a time, and I can't really use it. I can't keep it open to the things that I discussed on Twitter, and so I can scroll back in my own timeline and remind myself exactly what they were and credit the right people, and also take your feedback. So Mastodon, too, has the similar problem, and I imagine somewhere out there is either already exists or someone's working on a TweetDeck-like substitute for Mastodon. Who knows? There are things that I wish that the site featured, Mastodon, or that the bird site hadn't gotten rid of, that are apparently gone now, and I can't have them anymore. Anyway, I just, I'll see if I can scroll back now, and then hopefully I'll also find my train of thought while I'm doing that. But at any rate, what I saw was, and I think I retweeted it. I certainly, although I've been trying to do less on the bird site because Musk's getting worse, and it's very difficult to justify providing content for his site now. Here it is. I happened to see a tweet that was passed on. Well, I'll give everybody credit here. I saw retweeted into my timeline by someone else, by someone by the name of Gail Na, Galena, and I don't know if that's a real name or not, tweeting under the address / handle of Poison Jr. And, just a regular workaday type person who bears no check mark, fake or otherwise, and has just been living life out there, and tweeted, or retweeted, quote tweeted, which I guess you can't do on the Mastodon site, the comment of Taylor Hansen, who tweets as Taylor USA, it's Tayler, who is a check-marked person, and I don't know the origin of their check mark, but I imagine that they might have had it earlier, an independent journalist type person. And Gail's comment was, yeah, you made us need to do this. Taylor is tweeting pictures, which the commentary reads, is from the scene outside of Patchouli Joe's in Denton, Texas. A place, both Denton and Patchouli Joe's, with which I am not familiar, but I am informed by Taylor here that a transgender story time for children is being hosted there. And, that's the biggest threat in the world these days to lunatics and mass shooters. And what are we seeing needing to be done? Quite correct, Gail. Outside are, in addition to people holding, I don't know what flag this is, but this is the old, the old LGBTQ pride flag with the new, what do you call the triangle shaped thing there, the field that's inserted for the transgender community, as opposed to the trans flag where the whole thing is the trans colors. And I don't know. I don't know what the new terminology is for the flag, but the nice inclusive flag that has everybody on it is being displayed outside, but held up. That's not the focus of the picture. Held up by people dressed all in black in tactical gear and masks and radio headsets and everything, and holding their own AR-15 style assault rifles. And it's gotten to the point where, a long time ago it really happened. And we've discussed them, I think, occasionally, the LGBTQ and everything else now, gun clubs that have been sprouting up, teaching people, if you're going to become the constant targets of lunatics who respect nothing but guns and body armor, it might be, and they might not respect ours, even if we get it, but it might give us a fighting chance to, or might signal to them that this is not going to be that easy. Very much the way, that's why I admired so much the fantastic story that Darwin read for us yesterday of Mr. Fierro. Was it Rich Fierro? I have to go back and learn. I mean, it should be a household name, of course, but there was no time because now we're mourning the next mass shooting, which I haven't even gotten around to talking about yet. But back on the first one, that's why I admired his story so much, was that there was an outcome where you dressed up in all the stuff that's supposed to make you powerful and invincible, and you were still taken down by an unarmed person who then proceeded to beat the living crap out of you. And I don't know. I guess I wish that would happen more. I don't know what to wish for in this situation. Anyway, all of that now has to take a back seat to the shooting at the Walmart in, is it Chesapeake, Virginia? Yeah, I think so. I'm been down in that corner of Virginia a couple of times lately, and I'm getting the various towns mixed up. But I believe it was, Chesapeake, Virginia, down in the southeast corner of Virginia, and at a Walmart. And like I was saying, the shooting happened at what I had said was the place, the safe place of sorts for people who typically spend all of their time mocking the concept or need for safe places for others. Walmart, where they feel comfortable. Although, as it turns out, it sounds now like it might have been a disgruntled employee or ex-employee who may have shot co-workers in the break room at Walmart. And I guess if you're working at Walmart, you probably don't think of Walmart as your safe space. And of course, no one who hates safe spaces thinks of Walmart as their particular safe place. But it's a place where you are supposed to be safe. And Walmart just occupying as much real estate as it does in the United States is simply going to, statistically, going to host more accidental shootings, mass shootings, etc., than anyone else in the country. And of course, add in the angle of the disgruntled worker. Well, if you also employ the most disgruntled workers in the world, you will have that problem from time to time as well. Okay, so I should park this tweet that led us down this path in Pocket so that I can hand it to you. But I now have to go through so many strange and I'm in the native app here, so I don't have to click open different windows, etc. That was from TweetDeck. Actually, as handy as it was also very annoying in that respect. All right. So, at any rate, I guess we're on the record now as having mentioned that there was this shooting. I should see what is new in the news about that, because I picked up the story last night when there were scant details, and I just parked something in Pocket so that as a reminder, and if nothing else, I could read that. And it looks like, maybe there's not much more. Here's something a little bit more recent than my piece yesterday from WAVY, which is Wavy, the TV station in here, one of the major TV stations in the area. But that it says they last reported on it 10 hours ago, which I suspect is untrue. I guess I can click through on that one, and I'll click through the NBC News one to see if they have more updates. Let's see. I mean, it looks to me like, here we go. All right. I'll do the WAVY, which I don't know. That might even be the local NBC affiliate now that I think about it. Well, I'd like to get the local reporting angle on it. And they did update it early this morning, or right before showtime, as a matter of fact. So we'll go with that. Last night, it sounded like they were worried that some 10 plus people might have been killed, but as it turns out, 6 of them were killed and 4 remain hospitalized after the shooting. And perhaps we'll find out what the prospects are for recovery for these folks. But, as we always find out after these shootings, they're expected to make a full recovery, but we don't know. And I don't know what kind of weapon was used, and that's, at least partially relevant, and will also tell us a little bit about their prospects for recovery as well. Let's see. Interesting way of putting it. I think this has now become the journalistic standard. The headline tells us 6 killed, 4 remain hospitalized after mass shooting at Chesapeake Walmart. CPD confirms, and then a subheader that tells us 7 are dead if you include the gunman, which, okay, we just did. All right. But they leave them out of the total now these days. It's kind of interesting. Authorities say 7 people, including the suspect, are dead following a mass shooting Tuesday night at a Walmart just off Battlefield Boulevard in Chesapeake, Virginia. You're probably familiar with it if you use Battlefield Boulevard on your way from the Virginia area down to the Outer Banks of North Carolina for a pleasant vacation and an escape from the day-to-day reality of mass shootings. Police say there were multiple counts both dead and injured found inside the building where the shooting occurred. A greeter on duty at the time told WAVY the shooting started in the back of the store. One person was also found deceased outside the front entrance. I recall that from last night, and that made for some confusion. The call reporting the shooting came in at 10:12 p.m. I mean, this is, I guess, straight factual stuff from WAVY. So 10 p.m. Tuesday, when Walmart Supercenter was still open to the public, night shift workers had just recently checked in. Chesapeake held an 8 a.m. news conference on Wednesday with updates on the investigation. Police Chief Mark Solsky confirmed the gunman was an employee at the store. He said the gunman used a pistol in the deadly mass shooting. The shooter's next of kin has not been notified. They did not identify the gunman during Wednesday morning's press conference, as I think we probably prefer it these days. But there you have it. I guess now everyone will run around saying, see, it wasn't an AR-15 that was used. And, okay, I'm sure everybody's relieved. But it does possibly mean that, there's a better chance than usual for the 4 people who remain hospitalized to actually survive the shooting, because AR-15s tend to tear you apart. And even if you get shot in a non-vital area of the body, it's problematic. It says here that the gunman died from self-inflicted wounds. So there you have that exit being used again. And no good guys with guns on hand somehow to take this shooter out in heroic fashion. Apparently that's reserved for unarmed folks to do. A spokesperson for Centara Norfolk General Hospital, the area's closest level 1 trauma center, confirmed 5 patients were being treated there. 2 of the patients later died. 2 remain in critical condition, and 1 patient listed in good condition. Like, imagine, I'm good. I just got shot, but I'm good. And at any rate, okay. I mean, I think at this point, those are the basics. That's what you need to know. The rest of it is kind of promotion for the news station. We hear about 10 on your side. That's the Channel 10, WAVY, apparently broadcasting on Channel 10. And they're on your side, not the shooter's side, they reassure you. And 10 on your side will update it with further information, which is kind of their job. So I don't know. Anyway, fantastic, wonderful. So glad for 10 on your side getting product placement mentions in the mass shooting news. But there you have it. I mean, all you can do is put that on the record at this point and shake your head in disbelief and continue on from there. There are, of course, many other stories out there to catch up with the standard type of story, although this is increasingly becoming the standard type of story, to no one's surprise, perhaps. But there you go. Oh, and let's see. Oh, well, by the way, I'm checking on the native app here to try and see if anybody has anything to say about TweetDeck. Mighty OCD says TweetDeck still, for Chrome, still works. I'm not operating on Chrome, so, and I've tried. I just never found it particularly helpful to me, more so than I like Firefox, and I've continued using it, and even though that's from like 1890, I guess, at this point. I mean, Chrome's pretty old, too. Anyway, you and your smug attitude. Anyway, I don't know. I'm making that up. It was good to know that TweetDeck still works, and if I really need it, I can rig it up so that it will work. Mine is just sitting there blank, which is kind of zen, but it doesn't tell me any news. All right. There are many other comments to check up on, but I don't see. And I'm trying to check my. I should open up I guess another tab for like the KITM hashtag, and maybe we can do things that way and limp along on that jury-rigged system for just a while. Okay, so not quite break time here, so maybe we can sneak something in. I'll start in no particular order. It will be the reverse order in which these things appear in Pocket. Let's see. From the Hill, not usually a source from which I'll read, for your basic news, but it's here. It's sitting in front of me, and it's lousy, but no lousier than the rest of my usual primary sources. Rebecca Beach, whose work we've read before from the Hill, and it's been pretty good. When its original reporting, this time judges appear skeptical of Trump's special master appointment. There was some activity at the appeals court yesterday in the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals handling things now, and it looks like from the chatter coming out of the court and people reporting from inside the courtroom how things were going and what sorts of questions the judges were asking, it sounds like they might end up throwing out Judge Cannon's order appointing a special master, which, may or may not upset Judge Deary very much. He probably anticipated it coming down that way, but in the meantime, it's like, I guess I'll just cash these paychecks and do my job. And if they find the whole thing unnecessary, well then, the money's still in my account, so I guess I'm okay. Federal appeals judges appeared skeptical Tuesday that former President Trump should have been awarded a third-party special master to review the documents stored in his Florida home as the Justice Department works to nullify the appointment. Lawyers for the DOJ and Trump appeared before a 3-judge panel. That's the normal operations, in case you were wondering. On the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta, the latest battleground as the Justice Department seeks to expedite its access to more than 22,000 pages of government documents. This is sort of conclusory language. It just strikes me as I'm reading it. The sentence reads, as the Justice Department seeks to expedite its access to more than 22,000 pages of government documents stored at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, I guess they probably think that that's neutral language, and maybe it is, though it strikes me that the correct language probably, maybe they're waiting for a conviction, and eventually history will record this as stolen documents at Mar-a-Lago. They're stored there, but, that's about it. Anyway, I guess they get away with that one. The arguments did not seem to bode well for the Trump team, with one of the judges asking amid the arguments, "What are we doing here?" And, I wonder where the emphasis was on that. Let's see. So it doesn't bode with the Trump team. One of the judges asking, so it could be either, so what are we doing here exactly? What is it that you're arguing? Or was it what are we even doing here? Like, your argument is so dumb, I can't believe that we're here. It's made it to an appeals court because the judge below has made a gigantic mistake. Anyway, on the bench were 2 Trump appointees. I wonder which one asked, what are we doing here? Judge Britt Grant and Judge Andrew Brasher, who previously sided with the Justice Department, granting its request to siphon off the classified material from the Special Master Review and allowing them to be turned over to investigators. But the Justice Department hopes to more quickly gain access to the remaining documents in order to inform its investigation, potentially speeding ahead of likely ongoing legal challenges to the review by Judge Raymond Dearie, the Special Master. In other words, what they're looking to do here is, the Special Master was just in there as a request to slow things down. And the process would be, the Special Master would make these determinations, Trump would appeal them, and then you would have that litigation, and then you would appeal from that. And where would you even take that appeal? And that could go to the 11th Circuit, certainly, but why have 7 different appeals when you can just take it directly to the 11th Circuit, and from there, I guess, eventually to the Supreme Court if necessary. Trump attorney James Trusty, who's not, was almost immediately interrupted by Grant after he referred to the search of Trump's home as a raid, as we do here on the show. I mean, we don't refer to it as a raid. We interrupt whenever somebody does refer to it as a raid, and so does the judge, and that's pretty interesting. So he apologized for using such, quote, a loaded term after the judge inquired whether deeming it the execution of a search warrant would be more accurate. So that was nice. And at another point, Chief Judge William Pryor, not a Trump appointee, but no slouch in the conservative department, a George W. Bush appointee, questioned why Trump should be entitled to a special review of the contents collected during the search at his home when few other criminal defendants, let alone those who have yet to be charged, are afforded a similar process. It was a very hostile panel for the former guy. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Some of the craziness going on in the background, keeping an eye on my texting machine as we arrange for a maths, with the plural for you British folks, maths tutoring session special today, even though there's no school. But there's a test coming up in the hard kind of maths that high school seniors tend to take. So anyway, if the machine starts ringing at any point, I'll have to go and deal with that. All right, let's see. Where were we in the read through about what happened in the 11th Circuit yesterday? Chief Judge William Pryor. So 2 Trump appointees plus Pryor is that's a conservative, it's all conservative panel. And yet, by most accounts, I think it was running against Trump. And there was some sympathy from one of the Trump appointees, but it was weighted pretty heavily in the other direction. So that was very interesting to see that happen. And so again, Chief Pryor's question here is why should there have been a special master, just generally speaking? Like the argument below, accepted by Judge Cannon, which might be a huge mistake, was, it's extraordinary circumstances. It's a former president. And basically they said, well, minus the fact that it's a former president. Like, just put that out of your mind for a second. Would any criminal defendant be allowed this kind of intervention for a standard, warranted search and seizure. And the answer, I think they already knew ahead of time, was no. And that leaves Trusty here, the Trump lawyer, just standing there arguing, yeah, but it is a former president. I know, but we say leaving that aside, would you come to this conclusion? Well, no, but that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a former president. And basically that isolated him with the only argument you've got is that there should be special treatment in this case because it's a former president. And if we don't believe in that in this country, then you're out on your ass. But, we might believe in that in this country when the former president is from our party. So let's see what happens. But not so far anyway. But maybe this is this could be CYA somehow. We don't know. We got to wait for the actual decision. But every indication is if what they said in court has any bearing on what they plan to rule, it doesn't look good for the former guy. Other than the fact that this involves the former president, everything else about this is indistinguishable from any pre-indictment search warrant. Pryor said, that's the judge for the 11th Circuit, who's on this panel. And we've got to be concerned about the precedent we would create that would allow any targets of a federal criminal investigation to go into a district court and to have the district court entertain this kind of petition and interfere with the executive branch's ongoing investigation. Trusty struggled to answer the judge's question about prior case law, noting the novel nature of the search of the home of a former president. In other words, here this turns to, well, okay, so that having been said, can you name do you have any prior existing precedent for special treatment for any kind of defendant? Or do you have anything that, okay, well, prior former presidents have had this problem, and so we have these precedents to turn to. Well, of course, no former president has had this kind of problem, and so no, there's no precedent. So yeah, he struggled to try and find something. He has to find something else, and he says, oh, well, it's not special treatment. It's just basic facts of where we are. This is a situation where a political rival has been subjected to a search warrant where thousands of personal materials have been taken. I'm sure he meant to say that better, but just didn't. It was oral argument. But again, you see what's happening here. Okay, so minus the fact that it's a former president, what do you have for us? It's a former president. And personal materials have been taken. And I don't know whether this report gets into the personal materials in question, but I have seen some reports about what really upset Trump, and I would say you'll be surprised, except, you'll be like, oh, what's wrong with that guy? But not surprised in the end. Anyway, but at another point, and we'll just follow along with the narrative that they provided in the Hill. At another point, Pryor seemed irritated that Trusty had not demonstrated the ability to meet one of the key tests when seeking the return of seized property. They started to get into the minutia. They really could have just spent 5 minutes on the case by saying, all right, the basic question is, we think that there should never have been a special master appointed. Why do you think there should have been a special master appointed? And then when he comes down to saying, well, it's just because it was a former president, then he say, okay, right, I thought that's what you were going to say. The answer is no, there should never have been a special master appointed. So we're ordering the end of this nonsense. But, since we're here and we're all in our robes and everything, we got to get the robes cleaned anyway, so we might as well go ahead and have a full hearing. Can you tell me anything else about some of the minutia? For instance, can you tell me there are certain tests that federal courts use when a defendant is seeking the return of seized property, and certain conditions that have to be met before a court will, intervene in this fashion. So that's what you're looking for. So can you tell me how you meet the conditions of this test? And Trusty again is like, no, not really. I mean, here are some words, but underlying it all is no, not really. That's my answer. He can't actually do it. So how does it go? Pryor then gets irritated that he can't demonstrate the ability to meet one of the key tests when seeking the return of seized property. That is, that the government showed a callous disregard for a plaintiff's constitutional rights. If you can demonstrate that, you might get your stuff back. But of course, you all know the circumstances of the execution of this warrant. They called ahead of time. They said, we're coming over. They made sure not to send uniformed officers. They all came in business attire, and it was a pretty low key search. They waited until Trump wasn't on the premises so he wouldn't be bothered, et cetera, et cetera. It will be difficult to show that the government showed a callous disregard for the plaintiff's constitutional rights. So, one more chance for you. What do you have to say? The judge again saying, the entire premise of the exercise of this extraordinary kind of jurisdiction would be that the seizure itself is unlawful. Now, if you can't establish that, then what are we doing here? Now we get some sense of where that question comes from. The Justice Department on Tuesday pushed back against the use of a special master. What he wants, I guess the defendant here, Trump, is not really the documents back. As I said, he already has them back. Sopan Joshi argued on behalf of the government. What he wants is to prevent the government from using the documents. And I'm not sure that would ever be a valid justification, he added, noting such a move would usually come through a motion to suppress evidence at a later stage. Exactly right. I mean, certainly a defendant can say, we think that this was improperly gained, or we have some reason to believe the government should not be allowed to use this. Okay. Tell me that at trial. We'll have a motion to suppress the evidence. What are we doing here on the special master situation? That's not what special masters are about. Joshi also argued that Trump's attorneys had laid out a dizzying list of supposed privileges to justify scheduling the scheduling? That's what it says. Justify scheduling the records from prosecutors. I don't know if scheduling is the right word there. I don't know what they were going for, but it got through spell check, I guess. I'll have to think about that one. Anyway, Trump's attorneys, Joshi, he probably pronounced Joshi. Trump's attorneys, Joshi said, initially raised attorney-client privilege issues, only to later bring up executive privilege issues, and then claimed some of the documents may have been declassified, then moving to claim some of the presidential records could be his personal property. Remember this? It took a while to go through all these iterations, but we've discussed them pretty extensively on the show. But it is remarkable to put them all together and say, now these guys have been here. They can't even justify having a special master in the first place. They can't answer any of your questions. And they're like, the documents are attorney-client privilege. No, they're not from attorneys or to attorneys or about any litigation. So no. Well, then they're executive privilege because he was president when he, read them. No. If they're executive privilege covered documents, that means that they're inherently, they're inherently governmental in nature, which means they shouldn't be in your office. Are you sure you want to go down that path? Well, it's okay because some of them have been, or all of them have been declassified mentally by the president himself. Some even when he was still president, and others later by superpowers or something like that, right? That's one of the problems. And then they say, well, is there any way for you to prove or document in any fashion that anybody else heard about this? Because everybody else in the world thinks these are classified documents. No, not really. All right. Well, got anything else then? Yes. Well, then they are personal property. Okay. But even if they were, those gigantic bales of marijuana are my personal property. You can't use them against me in my drug possession case. Sure we can. That's the very nature of seized evidence. Oh, well, what if it wasn't? What if it was the former president? Well, then, the former president's a pothead. Is that what you're asking me? What do we do in that case? Nothing. I mean, he's a pothead, and to the extent that that's problematic, we prosecute him for it. But executive privilege? No, we just did that one. No, that's where that was the last one we handled. Now you say personal property, which, by the way, means that there's no executive privilege in it. If you're now saying this is personal property, then there's definitely no executive privilege in it. Anyway, this just sort of emphasizes how anomalous and extraordinary what the district court did here was. He said, he being Sopan Joshi, arguing on behalf of the government. The hearing was the latest development in the Mar-a-Lago case since Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the appointment of a special counsel, the fake name Jack Smith, to take over both the documents investigation and the DOJ investigation into the events of the Capitol riot, which may or may not be an ideal situation. We'll see how that plays out. In court, Trump's lawyers also argued their position was weakened as they have yet to gain access to an unredacted copy of the warrant used to gain access to Trump's property. Trump's team filed a motion to Florida District Court Judge Eileen Cannon, the only one who will listen to them, who first appointed the special master, to force DOJ to release the warrant, but it's unclear if such a motion should be directed to Judge Bruce Reinhart, who first approved the document. Probably. But I guess you could sit there and argue, and I guess they will, because it takes time to argue things, and that's what they really want, that it should be handled by someone else. Deary, the special master, is set to hold a status conference with the two sides next week, where trustees said they will review some 930 remaining documents, maybe. The big swaths of that will be decided with a legal ruling rather than kind of a one-by-one look at the document, he said. Except the legal ruling in question might be the one from the 11th Circuit that says next week's status conference will be winding the whole thing down because there should never have been a special master in the first place. We're closing you down. You can have one or two more status conferences just to get together and say, yeah, none of this matters anymore, and you're all free to go your own way, or, well, we'll see. See what they decide to do. But anyway, that's an interesting update, and rough day in court for the former guy, and there are several rough days in courts going on for him simultaneously in many different places. Now, they didn't discuss this in this article, so we have to supplement the reporting by going to Marcy Wheeler, who writes, I remember I told you, you'll be somewhat surprised to find out what is the personal property that he's complaining about being seized from him. This is his one remaining thing, is that they've taken things that are personal and are clearly personal in nature. And I agree, they are personal in nature, but they took them from me, and that's violative of my constitutional rights, which it is, but it's not that there's no cure for it. You petition the government to give it back, and once the government has processed everything that you don't have a right to get back, you can have it back. What's the issue? I mean, it could be, there's conceivable ways in which being deprived of personality during this process, if the government wants to make problems for you, and this does happen in a lot of cases, they'll drag their feet in finally getting this personal property back to you. And if it's something of a, if it's got some time sensitive nature to it, I need it in order to do this, and that, my own personal business, and there's no reason I should be delayed except for you making my life hell because you're hoping that if you have me over a barrel, I'll agree to a plea bargain or something, and then you'll return this document to me. And let's see if you think that there's any conceivable injury to Donald Trump that a court would recognize. I mean, we could imagine an injury. It's kind of weird to have to think about what it might be, but I think in the end, even so, even if you can imagine that it's an injury for Donald Trump, who's crazy and stupid, and so therefore might think something crazy and stupid is a big injury to him, the courts probably wouldn't agree. It's all right here in the headline. Trump finally describes how the FBI injured him, and here's how: by taking his Celine Dion picture. That's right. What? Well, I'll tell you. The most important part of the hearing in the stolen document case before the 11th Circuit Tuesday came when Chief Judge William Pryor asked what the 11th Circuit should do if they find for the DOJ in their pleadings today. And the transcript here reads, "It seemed to me that because this is an appeal from an injunction for purposes of appellate jurisdiction, what we would do, if you're right, is we would vacate the injunction, vacate this order on the grounds that there's a lack of equitable jurisdiction. But that would be it. What we would have jurisdiction over is not the entire case. We would have jurisdiction, if we have jurisdiction, it's over that order, granting an injunction. Isn't that right? Technically, instead of reverse and remand with instructions, it's really just vacate. That's highly technical language to those of you who have no idea what's going on here. But Judge Pryor is asking DOJ essentially, exactly what are we deciding here? You were asking us to vacate an injunction that prevents you from the DOJ from using the documents that you seized. Remember, that's what Judge Cannon did. In addition to appointing a special master, said, you can't, remember she was trying to structure something that wouldn't impede an intelligence community review of the classified documents to see what problems may arise from the fact that they were stolen by a former president who's a blabbermouth and loves to be bribed, but still somehow prevent the DOJ from using them to investigate something else, or building the stolen documents case or other cases against the president. And they want to get rid of that injunction. And can we do that? And are you really just asking us to reverse the injunction? Or is there something else here? Do we have to force the lower court to come to a different decision? What exactly is going on? At any rate, I guess this is the beginning of the path towards the fantastic discovery that the whole thing centers on a Celine Dion picture. Marcy goes on to say, if Pryor's original view was right, it would allow DOJ to use the documents in a prosecution of Trump, but would leave Judge Eileen Cannon with the authority to still meddle in the case. Sopan Joshi, arguing for DOJ, disagreed and walked Judge Pryor through a SCOTUS precedent that says that the court would necessarily have the authority to reverse the decision entirely. Joshi must have persuaded to some degree because Judge Pryor decided, if you're right, what we're really talking about is a middle position. That is, I was right about vacate the injunction against using these documents, but you're right about the authority to remand with instructions to dismiss. Remand just means we would take the case, send it back to the judge below, in this case, Cannon, with direct instructions. You've made a mistake. You should have dismissed this motion for a special master to be appointed, but instead you appointed a special master. That's your error, and we're not asking you to look for other grounds to justify the special master. We're telling you there are none. Your instructions are to dismiss the case. Dismiss the pleadings, anyway. Ordinarily, Pryor continues, if a district court lacks jurisdiction, that's what we do. We vacate and remand with instructions to dismiss. Joshi replied, fair enough, and I'm not going to fight you too hard on it. Judge Britt Grant then piped in to ask Joshi whether we, in your view, if we decide there was not equitable jurisdiction in the first place, we wouldn't need to go through the bases of jurisdiction for the injunction and the special master or anything like that. The lack of jurisdiction, as it was brought, would resolve all the questions in your mind. Is that right? That is to say, yeah, Eileen Cannon never had the jurisdiction to name a special master in this case in the first place. So that's the reason that you're not allowed to do it. It was a huge overreach. Joshi was pretty happy with that too, saying, I think that's right. Now, this technical debate, which took up about a quarter of the hearing, not only betrays that at least two of the 11th Circuit Court judges are thinking of how to give DOJ what it wants, but how to do so procedurally. And they seemed persuaded ultimately that they should just vacate the entire special master appointment altogether, ending the entire process. Things didn't go well for Jim Trusty, Trump's lawyer. Just as he started to get going on claims about Biden ordering a search on a political candidate's home, which is a lie, Grant interrupted and corrected his use of the word raid, right? Do you think raid is the right word for the execution of a warrant? When Trusty tried to claim that this warrant had been a general warrant, search everything, look for anything, Pryor scolded, but you didn't establish that it was a general warrant. The first of multiple times when judges reminded Trusty he had not made the arguments he presented today before, not before any court. That's because these accusations are being made in the media and on television and in Truth Social, etc. But no court has ever heard any reasoning why you would say, agree that this is a general warrant. It's not. They don't issue those. And you say it is, and so therefore unconstitutional. What makes you say that? It might make us win if I say that. Yeah, but I mean, what's your reasoning for calling it that? You don't just slap that label on it and hope to win. I was actually hoping to just slap that label on it and win. Yeah, all right. Well, I guess that won't work. So no, to that one. Grant pointed out that Trusty was misstating what their purported goal was, which was originally to review for privilege. Then, as Trusty reeled off the things that the FBI seized, that he said were incredibly personal, Grant asked, "Do you think it's rare for the target of a warrant to think it's overreaching?" And that really got to the heart of the question, which was, I understand the claim you're making, but you should understand that all criminal defendants who've had property seized think it's a government overreach. And it very often is not. So, I mean, is there something special about this case? Wow. Well, Marcy says that's a mic drop moment right there. She was back again, Judge Grant, a few minutes later as Trusty tried to argue what he thought the binding precedent should be, rather than what it actually was. Grant got to the core of the issue, which was that Trusty was asking for special treatment. And she asked the question, if you set aside, which I understand that you don't want to do, but if you do, for the purposes of this question, set aside the fact that the target of the search warrant was a former president, are there any arguments that would be different than any other defendant, any target of a warrant who wished to challenge a warrant before an indictment? Trusty tried to reframe her question. Well, we're not looking for special treatment for President Trump. We are recognizing there is a context here where no president, and Judge Pryor then interrupts. I don't know that that's particularly responsive. The question was, set aside the fact that the subject of the warrant is the president. What's to distinguish this from any other subject of a criminal investigation? When Trusty tried to raise the concerns that he claimed Trump had had all along, Pryor responded, I don't see where that case has been made, whether it's any of the privilege claims or that this is personal property and was seized in violation of, in reckless disregard for the client's constitutional rights. Now, I don't see where any of that has been made here. Again, Trump didn't make the arguments he needed to in September to gain the relief he is demanding now. That's when Pryor laid out the real practical problem with Trusty's claims. We have to determine when it's proper for a district court to do this in the first place, which is what we're looking at now. And the last question was one posed that makes clear that basically, other than the fact that this involves a former president, everything else about this is indistinguishable from any pre-indictment search warrant. And we've got to be concerned about the precedent that we would create that would allow any target of a federal criminal investigation to go into district court and to have a district court entertain this kind of petition, exercise equitable jurisdiction, and interfere with the executive branch's ongoing investigation. I know it's all very technical, but what they're saying is if you allow this simply on the basis that, if you allow it on the basis that was originally pled that, they took personal property, then anybody who has their property seized with a pre-indictment warrant will be able to get a special master. Now you'll recall, I know it's all very confusing, but you'll recall that right at the beginning, we said there's really no basis for allowing a special master here. That's not what special masters technically or typically, or either one. They told me I could say either one. That's not what special masters do. That's not what special masters are for. They usually are involved when there's a search of an attorney's office and there's a tremendous amount of probably privileged material there, and they don't want the prosecuting side to be able to see all of this stuff that will probably be excluded as attorney-client privileged material. And the special master will do that rather than trusting an FBI firewall, or if they think there's lots of sensitive stuff, things like that. Perhaps you would use a special master. There really was no such issue here. So they had to invent this idea of, equitable jurisdiction so that Eileen can, and she invented this thing essentially for herself, or just applied it to herself and said, basically it's because he's the president. And they said, well, that's not a real thing. So if he wasn't the president, would any of this have applied? And the answer is no in their minds. And Trustee is stuck there saying, but he is the president. You keep telling me to set aside the fact that he was the president. And I tried to do that, but that doesn't make any sense because his whole being is wrapped up in the fact that he was the president. But that's his problem, not anybody else's, besides which he's not the president now. But okay. So that's pretty amazing all by itself. Now, after Trustee started wailing more about personal documents, Pryor jumps in again. Again, his answer to this is, but that stuff is, okay, so I can't talk about the fact that he's president. Well, this stuff is really, really personal. Yeah, like the other judge said, is that different from the way it is when other defendants have their stuff seized? Sometimes personal property gets taken. You got an opportunity to get it back and to keep it out of evidence. Just not here, not using a special master. So, after Trustee continues whining about the personal stuff, Pryor says, you've talked about all the other records and property that were seized. The problem is the search warrant was for classified documents and boxes and other items that were intermingled with that. So, validly granted, anything intermingled, anything in these boxes that comes with it. Now, I don't think it's necessarily the fault of the government if someone has intermingled classified documents and all kinds of other personal property. In other words, if you stick your personal property in a box full of classified documents and they come to seize the classified documents, yeah, the personal property is going to go. And whose fault is that? That's really the defendant's fault for sticking those things in that box. I mean, not that you foresaw the search coming, but who cares whether you foresaw the search or not? The government was entitled to make the search and the seizure, and you'll get your property back after it's processed. So that's when Trustee revealed that the FBI took a picture of Celine Dion. Dion, Marcy reminds us, refused Trump's request to play his inauguration. And I'm not certain why that has any bearing other than to say, I guess he really likes Celine Dion. But why keep the picture? I don't know. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are at the end of, I think, of Marcy's retelling of things here. It's the funniest thing. I just can't tell you. I don't understand Trump's attachment to this picture. But, I mean, what do we understand about Donald Trump? About anything, I guess. So basically, boo-hoo, they took my personal property. Well, you keep just saying personal property. Like, what is this thing that we're talking about? And as it turns out, among other things, I guess there's other things, but the best that they could come up with, I mean, Trump's own lawyer, Trustee, basically comes into, well, there's this picture of Celine Dion, which is interesting because I'm sure that the judges, he meant for the judges to say, well, that can't be particularly important to the government investigation. They should give that back. But I mean, yes, they should. And I'm sure the government would say, and we will. And they might say, well, when are you going to do it? Because hurry up. But then even if you were inclined to say that, the government lawyer would probably just say, okay, we will. I mean, I'm not really sure why it has taken as much time as it has to give it back, but it might have something to do with the fact of, and this isn't a fact, this is an opinion, but I preface it by saying it might have something to do with the fact that who gives a crap? Because, we should give it back, but if you're going to rake the government over the coals here, it's your prerogative. You could do that as judges, but I guess I'd ask you, what purpose do you imagine you're serving here? We should give the thing back, but if the picture of Celine Dion is late in getting back, and let's concede for a moment that it might be, so effing what? What was the former president of the United States going to be doing with this picture of Celine Dion between the time we seized it and now that causes injury? Like how much compensation does Donald Trump think he's entitled to from the government based on claim of deprivation of a picture of Celine Dion? And I'd love to know what makes him think that this is cognizable by the federal judiciary. And I guess the answer is either, well, now that you put it that way, nothing, or I mean, you choose your own adventure on this one. What would be the injury that would entitle him to some kind of compensation, even if it's just, a moral victory? $1. Why? I needed the picture of Celine Dion because blank. Tell me. I can't think of a good one. I can think of some bad ones. I can think of some disturbing ones, but I can't think of any good ones. I needed it because Kim Jong-un was going to bomb us unless I gave it to him. Maybe make the claim, but so far nothing, I guess. So pretty wild, honestly. So where do we leave off? Right, Trusty. Oh, I think we left off right in the middle here. Celine Dion had refused Trump's request to play his inauguration, which you would think would make Trump throw the picture out. But instead, he's throwing darts at it. And then, I therapeutically, I throw darts at this picture of Celine Dion. And without the picture, I can't do my daily dart throwing. And it caused me undue anxiety. Okay, I'm going to deny you the compensation you're looking for, but it's a thing. No. So now, we have Marcy just saying, now Trump's grave injury all begins to make sense. The FBI hurt him by taking his Celine Dion picture. All the wailing and screaming since August now begins to make sense. Not really, but Trusty went on blathering, claiming, for example, that the injunction hadn't harmed the government because they had months before and after the seizure to conduct the investigation. When Trusty claimed the injunction was overblown, Pryor invited, I don't know exactly why she uses the word invited here, but Pryor says, think of the extraordinary nature from our perspective of an injunction against the executive branch in a pre-indictment situation. Under the separation of powers, the judiciary doesn't interfere with those kinds of prosecutorial and investigatory decisions, right? That's the whole nature of this kind of jurisdiction, this claim of extraordinary equitable jurisdiction by a very low-ranking judge on the federal judiciary. And they're not buying it. After Pryor asked about a new argument that Trusty was making, Joshi reeled off the 5 different arguments that Trump has advanced, right? So here's number 6. Joshi closed with the practical fear Pryor had raised. If Trump has his way, every quote-unquote defendant, because remember, he hasn't been charged with anything here, so he's not a defendant yet, every defendant will demand pre-indictment intervention. This emphasizes how anomalous and extraordinary what the district court did here was. And I heard Mr. Trusty agree that there was no difference between this and other defendants. And I think that just emphasizes how the anomalous could become commonplace, and we think the court should reverse. Andrew Brasher, the one judge who hasn't really done much here, seemed more sympathetic to Trusty's arguments, at one point asking how much more of a delay this would cause, as if he might let this all play out, and that's what would happen if the 11th Circuit didn't entirely vacate Cannon's order. But ultimately, Trump was treated as if not a defendant, then at least someone who could create untenable rights for other defendants, which sounded like something that neither Pryor nor Grant were willing to do. Okay, I mean, it's a little confusing, but it's kind of worth wading through to get to the fact that this now all rests on, well, I really wanted to retain possession of this picture of Celine Dion, for instance. And okay, but that doesn't really help us here. What's your reasoning for getting this special master? I mean, you never, in arguing for the special master, you never once mentioned the Celine Dion picture. And it's probably because you knew how ridiculous it was. For you to have to resort to that in front of the 11th Circuit is even more ridiculous. So, last chance, is there anything in those boxes that isn't totally embarrassing for you that you're willing to say you gotta have back on an expedited basis and that only a special master can award it to you somehow? No? All right. Well, then we'll get back to you with the decision. That's where he stands on that one. That's a bad day. A really bad day. Now, there's more. from the courts. Charlie Savage had an initial take on this. I wonder whether he's updated it. But he was circulating it on social media yesterday, saying this is his first stab at it. In blow to Trump, Supreme Court permits House to obtain his tax returns. House of Representatives, of course, not just any house. Ending a long legal fight. Damn, is this a long legal fight, right? This stems from basically day one of his candidacy, that he was never going to give his tax returns. And then as president, he never gave his tax returns, and they fought. And then they, realized pretty quickly when Democrats took over control of the House after the 2018 elections. And they said now a Democratic majority ruling in the House can get those tax returns because the Ways and Means Committee has the power legally. There's a statute that says that they can request individual Americans' tax returns if there's legitimate purpose for it, and there was. And we've been litigating that. I don't know how long we've been litigating, but we've been fighting over this for a long time. At first, we fought over this because the new Democratic chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Richard Neal, was for some reason dragging his feet on all this. I don't want to be the one that caused the problems asking for his tax returns because something, it'll be viewed as inherently political. And blah, blah, blah. And finally it came around to, no, everyone can see what kind of a cheat he is and how many ways he's stealing money. We have got to get some kind of record of what he's doing with money out here for people to examine. It's outrageous already. Finally, he comes around to doing, and then of course finds himself in litigation. Now we've been litigating this for a long time. Ending a long legal fight, the subheader says, the Supreme Court, you've heard of them perhaps, rejected the former president's request that it block the IRS from turning over the files. I mean, at bottom, there's a law that says that the Ways and Means Committee in the House can request the tax returns of any particular individual. So they requested the tax returns of a particular individual. And Donald Trump has been litigating this for several years now, saying, the law doesn't say that. Or if it does, they don't mean me. And this is how long it takes a court to get around to, the last court of last resort, to finally say, the answer is what it was all along. You don't have any right to stop them, and stop suing already. This is the last stop here now. We're the Supreme Court, and we say the thing you've been doing for 2 years is nonsense. Okay? The court said it was nonsense. The appeals court said it was nonsense. The Supreme Court now says it's nonsense. The final word is it's nonsense. That's it. IRS, go ahead. Do what the law said you were supposed to do 2 years ago. That's really what they've been wasting time with. Charlie Savage, as I said, wrote this up for the New York Times. The Supreme Court cleared the way on Tuesday, same day as everything going on in the 11th Circuit, for a House committee to obtain former President Donald J. Trump's tax returns, refusing his request to block their release after a years-long fight. The court's brief order, which was unsigned and did not note any dissents, was another decisive defeat for Mr. Trump, delivered by a court that had moved to the right with his appointment of 3 justices. Good note. The decision meant the Treasury Department is likely to soon turn over 6 years of his tax returns to the House, which has been seeking his financial records since 2019. They should have been seeking them since 2018. And honestly, the Republican House, if it wasn't for partisanship, should have been requesting them since 2017, but they were not playing the proper oversight role because they were partisans and in Trump's corner regardless of his financial crimes. So they let it slide for the first 2 years. Anyway, then Democrats were handed the control and the ability to enforce this law and hemmed and hawed. They knocked knees together and got nervous that maybe the law doesn't really give us this power, litigating against themselves for the first year. And then finally saying, oh, all right, you're forcing me to do this. And then all Trump did was waste time. So the question is, if you have not a leg to stand on, how long will it take the judicial system to tell you no? And the answer is 2019, 2020, 2021, 22. almost to 2023. 4 years for every court in the country to exhaust all possibilities and say, the Supreme Court unanimously, unsigned, and in a paragraph or two, the law is the law. Everybody knows it. 4 years wasted. Now you're on the hook. Give the material. The IRS finally has to act. It wasn't even something that Trump held. By the way, if it was something that Trump held personally, he would have been destroying and flushing all the stuff down the toilet for 4 years. Representative Richard E. Neal, who's been asleep most of his life apparently, but is a Democrat of Massachusetts, who requested the files finally, as the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee said in a statement that his panel would, quote, now conduct the oversight that we've sought for the last 3.5 years. Except, I imagine that this is perhaps discussed later in the article, but what strikes you as odd about the timing here? Richard Neal finally now says, we'll now conduct the oversight that we have sought for the last 3.5 years. How much time has the Democratic chairman of the Ways and Means Committee got to conduct the oversight that he's been waiting for the last 3.5 years? The answer is 2 months, maybe? Less, really. It's November 23rd. He's probably not going to be doing it this week. It's Thanksgiving. The last week in November, and then he's got December, and then 3 days in January before the Ways and Means Committee apparently comes under the control of the Republican majority, and Richard Neal is no longer the chair. And of course, for most of December, they will likewise be on recess. They will be out this week for Thanksgiving. Don't know if they plan to come back next week or not. And then pretty soon they'll be saying it's the holiday season. Merry holidays. And Trump will grumble about they didn't say Christmas and da-da-da, but there's not going to be any work. They've been seeking this stuff for the last 3.5 years, quote unquote, and now they'll conduct the oversight. No, they won't. I used to write posts all the time entitled, "You're not getting your oversight." And you can win and this is a turnout problem for Democrats, right? For years, thankfully they got the turnout that they needed to avoid being totally swamped this year. But I mean, that's what they always promise, is that there'll be this vigorous oversight. Elect Democrats if you want vigorous oversight. Someone's going to, push back against Trump. Not on this. They're not. Not really. Anyway, Mr. Neal did not say whether the committee would publish the returns. Of course not. They don't have time to do that. And besides which, I don't know. He seemed to want to lose the whole time, to be quite honest. An aide on the Ways and Means Committee, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive matter, said no decision would be made until lawmakers received the files. No reason to believe that the IRS would particularly drag their heels on this one, unless there's embedded people somehow who will, I lost them. I don't know where they went. Anyway, lawyers for Mr. Trump, who announced last week that he would run for president again, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Trump has used the slow pace of litigation to run out the clock on various oversight and investigative efforts. Get it? His stonewalling and legal challenges have succeeded in keeping the House from obtaining his tax returns for nearly 4 years, but that strategy appears to have fallen just short. And I mean just short. So much so that it really didn't fall short, quite honestly. The House would almost certainly have dropped the request for Mr. Trump's tax returns in January when Republicans take control of the chamber. And they may still. And they may not have done anything with them in the meantime. So, his lawyers had urged the justices to extend a lower court's stay that had blocked the Treasury Department from providing the files, giving them more time to pursue an appeal before the Supreme Court. Douglas N. Letter, the chief lawyer for the House, had urged the Supreme Court not to intervene, pointing to the coming of a new Congress. Any further delay would leave the committee and Congress as a whole little or no time to complete their legislative work, he wrote in a brief this month. Mr. Trump ensured a conservative supermajority on the court for years to come, and it has repeatedly ruled against him in challenges he has brought before it. In recent years, the court has denied his efforts to challenge aspects of the 2020 election, to prevent prosecutors in New York from obtaining his financial records, and to have a so-called special master review about 100 sensitive government files seized from his residence in August. The Supreme Court's decision landed as an appeals court in Atlanta heard a broader challenge by the Justice Department, we just did this one, to the special master review. All three judges, including two of Trump's own appointees, appeared inclined to rule against him. The fight over whether the House can obtain Trump's tax returns traces back to his refusal in 2016 to make them public, breaking with modern precedent set by presidential candidates and sitting presidents. Yes, in 2019, after Democrats took over the House, they began oversight efforts, including of Mr. Trump's financial dealings. They secured testimony from Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, that Trump had boasted about inflating the value of assets when it served him, like when applying for loans, and undervaluing them when it helped lower his taxes. State authorities have also pursued such allegations. The Trump Organization is on trial in New York, where the district attorney is accused of tax fraud and other crimes. The New York State Attorney General has sued Mr. Trump and three of his children, accusing them of lying to lenders and insurers by fraudulently overvaluing his assets. The New York Times is also investigating Trump's taxes, including obtaining tax return data from 2020 that covered more than 2 decades. He, of course, paid no federal income taxes in 11 of 18 years that the Times examined, and reduced his tax bill with questionable measures, including a $72.9 million tax refund that as of 2020 was the subject of an audit by the IRS. Josh Koskinen, a former IRS commissioner during the Obama and Trump administrations, said on Tuesday that Mr. Neal would have to decide what to do with the returns, including whether to release a summary or the complete set of documents, but he suggested that given what was already known about Trump's finances, their public release may offer few surprises. So go ahead and do it. I mean, honestly, at this late date, in order to have effectively won a victory at all, there's nothing you can do but publish them and say, here they are, open records, search them and let the newspapers do this work because the Republican House won't. It's not clear to me what you're going to learn that you don't already know when you look at these returns, Mr. Koskinen said in an interview. Fine, then no problem. You'll have no objection, right? Early in 2019, Mr. Neal had asked the Treasury Department, finally, to provide Trump's tax returns under a law that gives the Ways and Means Committee the authority to see any taxpayer's documents. But the Trump administration refused to let the department turn over the records. While Mr. Neal has said the committee was studying whether changes were needed to an IRS program that audits presidents, Trump supporters maintain that this is a pretext for politically motivated fishing expedition and that Congress lacks the legitimate legislative purpose in seeking the records. In July of 2019, the House filed a lawsuit seeking to enforce its request. Trump's legal team vowed to fight the effort tooth and nail, and they did. And they lost at every level, but it took 4 years to do it. The case was assigned to a Trump-appointed judge, Trevor N. McFadden, who would ultimately rule that the law was on the House's side, but nevertheless stalled on making any ruling. The case was still pending before him in 2021 when the Biden administration entered office and the current Congress was seated. Neal renewed his request, and the Justice Department issued a memorandum saying the law on its face gave the committee a legal right to the returns. Last December, about 2.5 years after the House filed the lawsuit, Judge McFadden finally moved on the case, ruling that the committee indeed had a legal right to the records under a long line of Supreme Court cases that require courts to defer to valid congressional inquiries. But Judge McFadden also declared that he believed it would be unwise for the committee to use its authority to publish Trump's tax returns in the congressional record, as it is permitted to do under the same law that empowered Neal to request them. The case put the country in uncharted territory, he warned. Anyone can see that publishing confidential tax information of a political rival is the type of move that will return to plague the inventor, the judge wrote. But, he added, it might not be right or wise to publish the returns, but it is the chairman's right to do so. Still, Judge McFadden blocked the Treasury Department from turning over the records until the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit reviewed his decision. And in August, a 3-judge appeals panel upheld Judge McFadden's decision, which he delayed because he was right. Duh. Trump then asked for the full appeals court, an extra intermediate step, to reconsider the matter. After it rejected that request last month, Trump asked the Supreme Court to intervene, only for Chief Justice John Roberts to temporarily extend the block. Representative Bill Pascrell, a New Jersey Democrat who has been involved in the request for Trump's tax returns, praised the decision, saying a legal charade that had wasted taxpayer money was over. It has been 1,329 days since our committee sought Donald Trump's tax returns, almost as long as the American Civil War, he said in a statement. And for 1,329 days, our request made under law has been delayed, obfuscated, and blocked by Donald Trump and his adjutants in the government and in the courts. And that's the proper way to express it. And now the long national nightmare is over just in time for them to do next to nothing with it and ride off into the sunset. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. All right. Well, that covers that. I think we've pretty much gone into what happened directly to Trump in terms of what happened in court the other day. There were peripheral maneuvers in court. This one harkens back a ways and, of course, only encompasses other, I don't know if you can call them bit players, really, but in Trump world here. Dan Friedman from Mother Jones notes yesterday that the Chapter 11 trustee, the bankruptcy trustee, representing Guo Wengi's debtors. Remember, Guo Wengi is the, or did they say Gwengi or Wengai? Anyway, he's the supposed billionaire, I guess, who owned the yacht where they arrested Steve Bannon for his fraud in the We Build the Wall stuff. You remember this guy, right? Well, anyway, the trustee representing Guo Wengi's debtors, a guy by the name of Luc Despin, yesterday filed a motion. This is all technical stuff, but just want to let you know what's going on in Trump world. Filed a motion detailing Guo's effort to harass him. So he's the debtors trustee, representing the debtors of the supposed billionaire. Which is interesting all by itself. He goes on to say, with Guo's encouragement, his followers are harassing not only Despins, the trustee, but his ex-wife and daughters, who they doxed, using pictures of them from high school. Like, wow, okay. Guo appears to be, quote, paying his supporters. It's interesting. I mean, because he also claims to be broke. The billionaire who's broke, of course. He's paying his supporters to carry out this harassment campaign using probably worthless cryptocurrency. The people posting videos as part of this harassment on Guo's behalf, a woman named Pamela Tsai and a guy who uses the name Prince, also likened, lawyers for Guo's largest creditor, two of whom have Jewish names, to Nazi collaborators. This is incoherent, but still anti-Semitic. Despin's motion notes that Guo's efforts are an effort to, intimidate creditors and potential witnesses, and ask the bankruptcy judge to force Guo to submit to questioning about sicking his followers on the trustee and also lawyers for his top creditor. Guo claims he's anti-CCP, Chinese Communist Party. So anyone hindering him must be pro-Chinese Communist Party. He's attacked me, Dan Friedman, and everyone who reports on / faults him as actually being a Chinese Communist Party agent. That's very interesting. As it turns out, once again, even Guo Wengi, as a peripheral part of Trump world, every accusation is really a confession. But he actually does nothing to hurt the Chinese Communist Party, which is what makes him so suspect in claiming that he's so virulently anti-CCP. And as Mother Jones and others note, I guess here in a report in the New Yorker magazine, some of his activities actually help them. He's a a complicated figure, to say the least, and we can't get into reading that New Yorker piece necessarily. But Steve Bannon calls Guo the George Washington of China, and founded various organizations with him and benefits from Guo's financial schemes. He kisses Guo's ass when they appear together and echoes Guo's silly claims that his creditors and critics are all Chinese agents. Bannon may not be directly involved in Guo's current harassment of critics and doxing of the kids, but he reliably repeats Guo's false claims, etc., etc.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'll tell you later how I used my break. I'll tell you now because I'm thinking about it. I used my break working to try and get the Mastodon interface to do the things that I am missing from TweetDeck, as both Matthew Rigdon and Mighty OCD chimed in with some instructions to do that, and that's good news and helpful. And I don't know, but apparently if you go into preferences, you can enable what they call an advanced web interface that makes it look a little bit more like TweetDeck. In fact, very much like TweetDeck. So I'm very pleased by that. So thanks to Matt and to Mighty. What's your first name? Mighty. For forwarding those instructions. That's good. And it'll help me make the full transition, I think, eventually to Mastodon. Or, it could be that we end up landing somewhere else too. Mastodon seems to be where everybody's trying first. And I did see this mentioned the other day, and I just saw Darwin suggested perhaps Hive, about which I know nothing, but, what did I know about Mastodon? But Hive could be a possibility as well. I don't know why we're not all talking about that one, but there must be a reason, and maybe we all got paid by Mastodon, I guess. I don't know. But at any rate, so far so good, I guess, given that it's like a mass exodus and it's going to take us some time to reorganize elsewhere. All right, so we were in the middle of, actually toward the end of reading through Dan Friedman's update on what is happening with weird guy Guo Wengi, who is a little too closely associated with Steve Bannon and is a weirdo in his own right. And he's got some issues going on, and he's finds himself in court, and I guess just believes that no one will ever punish him for anything, which is something I think he learned from Trump world. So instead, he's just having internet trolls, paying them with cryptocurrency to dox and harass the lawyers working for his creditors in his bankruptcy proceeding. Let's see. We had mentioned the last tweet here. Steve Bannon may not be directly involved in Guo's current harassment of critics, and it's interesting that he hedges by saying current, but he reliably repeats Guo's false claims that his creditors and critics are all working for China. Bannon is complicit in Guo's actions, regardless of hints that he's just using him. So all very interesting. And by the way, in the first of the tweets here, there's an older from a couple of days ago, I guess I should say. Dan Friedman tweet attached saying earlier this year, Guo Wengi, an exiled Chinese mogul who has become a Trump booster and Bannon patron and touted his wealth, filed for bankruptcy after he was ordered to pay $250 million in a lawsuit. Guo then claimed to have less than $3,500 in assets. So that is of some interest, but that harkens back a ways to the Mother Jones article. You can click through and take a look at it. It's just sort of interesting, but it's not current news. It's from February of 2022. Steve Bannon's patron claimed to be a billionaire. Now he says he's broke. Guo Wengi, who touted his luxurious lifestyle, filed for bankruptcy. May or may not be real. Just sounds like he was living the jet-setting lifestyle, and then and he heard, if you get arrested or if you get sued to take away your money, just claim you're bankrupt, and then it will take years and years for them to figure out where your money is. And in the meantime, you can go on living like a billionaire. And that's exactly what he's doing, which is sort of the, private bankruptcy method of doing what Trump did with the tax returns, just litigating forever. And depending on the fact that in America, they want to prove everything, and it's going to take them forever to actually prove it. So you can just continue doing what you're doing while they cross every T and dot every I. Eventually, will they win? They might, but who knows? A meteor could hit the earth in between now and then, so go for it. So that's interesting. Also in the court front, I guess we will take a cue here from the, in this case, the Twitter profile, but Mueller, she wrote, has also moved over to Mastodon and points out with respect to the special counsel, which many people regarded as something of a disappointment because it wasn't immediate action on indicting and trying and convicting and executing Donald Trump, which, ought to happen, but won't. But pointing out about the special counsel that there's something that you should know about it. Garland's appointment of a special counsel actually protects the Trump investigations from being defunded. Remember that the Republicans are coming in and taking over the House, and murdery Trader Green is out there promising everybody that they'll simply defund everything that has anything to do with investigating Donald Trump, including the special counsel. But it's worth noting that, special counsel are appointed precisely because they're kind of protected from this sort of thing. And it's actually quite difficult to defund a special counsel. Not that murdery Trader Green knows that, and not that they'll follow any rules that would ordinarily make it difficult. They'll simply just declare it to be the case. But remember that the House can't do anything like that by itself. They need the agreement of the Senate. But could they shoehorn that into some sort of debt ceiling thing, like we're going to crash the world economy unless you agree, Senate, to defund the special counsel, and President Biden agree to sign the thing? Maybe they could go that route. But she's just pointing out that Garland's appointment of a special counsel actually protects the Trump investigations from being defunded, because special counsel isn't funded through congressional appropriations. It's funded from a permanent Treasury fund controlled by the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Now, that doesn't stop murdery Trader Green from making claims. She is threatening, as this person says here, some arcane 1800s rule, the Holman rule. What's going on here? Well, before we get too involved in it, Mueller, she wrote, responds, again, ultimately, even if they use this Holman rule, you're talking about passing legislation to defund that requires the agreement of the Senate and the signature of the president. Newsweek, which apparently is no longer really a super trustworthy source, but still exists nonetheless, has reported on this. Murdery Trader Green, although they use her real name in this, Holman rule will defund Garland's special counsel. Let's find out whether it actually would. Or rather, they're just saying, well, this is what Murdery Trader Green is saying. We're not passing judgment on it. Anyway. GOP Representative Murdery Trader Green of Georgia says that the newly announced special counsel investigations of former President Donald Trump will be, quote, defunded after Republicans seize control of the House. Attorney General Merrick Garland on Friday appointed veteran federal prosecutor Jack Smith as special counsel to spearhead criminal investigations of Trump regarding the classified documents found in his Mar-a-Lago club and his activities surrounding the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Green predicted that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy will reinstate a little-known House rule after being voted in as Speaker in January, with Republicans then moving to force the investigations to a grinding halt due to lack of funds. Holman Rule, look it up, Green tweeted on Friday. And then using McCarthy's Twitter handle, GOP leader is going to put it in place. That means no money for Garland's politically weaponized special counsel. Don't promise too many jobs. Whoops, defunded. The idiot child of the Congress wrote. The Holman Rule, which was introduced, if this matters to you, in the House in 1876, allows members of Congress to propose amendments to appropriations bills that target specific programs or individuals. Programs and specific workers can be stripped of pay or fired under the rule. Critics of the rule have said it allows members of Congress to unethically target individuals and government agencies for political purposes, gives the House Appropriations Committee too much power, and could potentially paralyze the federal government, which would excite them, I'm sure. When Republicans brought the rule back in early 2017, the National Federation of Federal Employees warned that this was nothing more than an expressway for the politically corrupt to commandeer the capability of the executive branch. Republicans could potentially reinstate the rule in January. Before it was reinstated in 2017, the Holman Rule had not been in place since 1983. It was rescinded after Democrats took control of the House in 2019. However, since the Republican House majority is likely to be razor thin and will include some members with political philosophies diverging from Green's, it is not clear that the new leadership would be able to easily reenact the rule. 3 Republicans voted against the rules package that contained the provision before it was reinstated in 2017, while 3 others did not vote. Doesn't really tell us much. A similar outcome combined with unified Democratic opposition could potentially block the change in the next Congress, at least if it's being added as a amendment somehow to the rules, if they're seeking to add that on the floor. But if they put it in their rules package, there probably won't be any Republicans voting against it, I would assume. So they could put it in the rules, but it still needs to be agreed to in the Senate and signed by the president. These are appropriations bills that we're talking about. Even if the Holman Rule does come back, using it to stop the investigation could prove difficult. Both the House and the Democrat-controlled Senate would have to vote to approve any amendments proposed under the rule. Republican lawmakers attempted to use the rule multiple times in 2017 and 2018, with none of their amendments ultimately passing. So, again, no record of success, even with a larger majority when they had it. If Republicans manage to reinstate the rule and pass a related amendment in the next Congress, President Joe Biden would still need to sign the attached legislation. Sarah Binder, political science professor at George Washington University's Columbian College of Arts and Sciences, told Newsweek that she suspects any Republican attempt to defund the investigation using the rule would fail. It's not clear to me that Republicans would get 218 votes to pass the bill in the first place, Binder says. Even if the House succeeded, I doubt a Democratic-led Senate would agree to a spending bill that defunds Department of Justice personnel conducting lawful investigations. Binder said that she also doubted whether Senate GOP leaders would necessarily back their House colleagues' efforts. Although Trump's vocal House supporters might think this is a powerful threat, I'd be skeptical their efforts would bear fruit, she added. And no comment from McCarthy's office on this one. Lawrence Tribe, a Harvard University professor emeritus in constitutional law, told Newsweek that Trump's remark that he would refuse participation. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I missed a paragraph here. Newsweek got no comment from McCarthy. Trump on Friday, suggested his own measures to halt the special counsel investigations. The former president told Fox News Digital that the probes were the worst I didn't feel like doing his voice. The worst politicization of justice in our country. And he would simply refuse to, quote, partake in them. Lawrence Tribe said, yeah, that ain't right. Refusing participation surely tops the list of all the ludicrous things the former narcissist in chief has ever said. So there you go. He just says, I'm just not going to participate in the investigations. The investigators say that's not how this works. Murdery Trader Green thinks she found a magic bullet. She doesn't understand these things. I guess they could find themselves in a place where the House says, we're not going to pass an appropriations bill without this, and we'll shut down the government / force the government into default in order to try to force the Senate to go along and the president to sign the bill. But, I don't know that won't be met with other extraordinary measures working in the other direction. So I don't hold out too much hope for them in getting them to do and making this happen. But it's the kind of thing that Murdery Trader Green would get all excited about and start tweeting about. Woo, we're going to force you to, to defund your own investigations. I don't think so. All right, let's see. Other things that require at least some attention before possibly disappearing into the weekend, since tomorrow is Thanksgiving, although I would very much like to have some recorded material for you, at least for Friday. Now if I don't mention these things, then I've got reason to come back and read you these stories. How shall we approach this? All right. We need to make you aware of it. And I don't know that this is really long, lengthy material. Anyway, in Arizona, they're still holding on to the possibility that, the kooks there, remember, they had the Cyber Ninjas so-called audit in Arizona. There are still diehards holding on to the possibility that they could drag things out to their tremendous embarrassment for a couple more weeks here. This report from Mark Elias over at his Democracy Docket publication, letting us know that, I gotta handle other things here for the moment. Anyway, in Arizona, election deniers suddenly decry voter suppression. So here's the thing, and here's your answer. Did you understand my answer, production staff?
Yes, 1 o'clock.
Yes, at Starbucks.
Oh, okay.
Because the library is closing. Okay, everybody knows now. In Arizona, election deniers suddenly decry voter suppression. Why would they be decrying that? Of course, they feel that they were suppressed, and that's the reason that they lost, as opposed to Carrie Lake as a terrible candidate. And people recognize that, even as Republicans, and didn't want to vote for her. In the Bonfire of the Vanities, Tom Wolfe wrote that a liberal is a conservative who's been arrested. That my old torts professors used to say that as well. I think even, I guess it wouldn't have been before Bonfire of the Vanities was published. I don't know. But at any rate, there he had a codicil to it, you remember. Anyway, Tom Wolfe wrote that a liberal is a conservative who's been arrested. After this year's midterm elections, I would add that a voting rights advocate is an election denier who lost a close election. Ever since she lost her election for Arizona governor, Carrie Lake has become deeply concerned with, of all things, voter suppression. Over the weekend, her campaign tweeted, the appropriate amount of voter suppression is 0%, which isn't an amount. But all right, she's not great with maths. In the plural. On its face, you can't really disagree with the sentiment. I have argued repeatedly against laws and practices that suppress lawful votes. I have litigated against states like Arizona that make voting unnecessarily complex or that enact laws aimed at disenfranchising voters. In fact, it was an Arizona ban on ballot collection that ultimately led to the U.S. Supreme Court's narrowing of the Voting Rights Act in Brnovich v. Democratic National Committee. At issue in that case was a law that targeted and villainized Latino mail-in voters who could not rely on the U.S. Postal Service to return their ballots. Yet there are, on Lake's own Twitter feed, Videos of voters who claimed that they waited in long lines to vote were sent from one polling place to another by overworked election officials and had their provisional ballots rejected because they failed to register in time for the election. If you didn't know better, you might think Lake was a champion of access to voting, supporter of funding for election officials, and an advocate for same-day voting registration, but she's none of those. To the contrary, Lake has spent the last 2 years trafficking in election-denying lies, bringing litigation to undermine voting rights, and encouraging Arizona and other states to restrict rather than expand voting access. Though she now criticizes the state for its slow pace in counting ballots, she sued last summer to ban the use of electronic voting machines in Arizona and require that voters fill out paper ballots that are hand-counted. Such a hand count would take weeks, if not longer, to complete. When her supporters staged armed vigilantes at county drop boxes, she was silent. When voters who were afraid to cast their ballots sued to stop the intimidation, she acted completely unconcerned with the voter suppression she now professes is so important to eliminate. What is different now is that she lost. Arizona's governor's race was not especially close. Current Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs defeated Lake by more than 17,000 votes, a margin even larger than what President Joe Biden beat former President Donald Trump by in 2020. The 0.6% difference is outside the statutory recount margin, and even if there was a recount, the margin is far larger than history suggests could ever be overcome, barring Lake from claiming that the results were too close to declare a winner. Nor can Lake claim fraud. There's simply no evidence of fraud in the election. I mean, she can claim it. She probably will, but there's no evidence of it, and there never will be, because it didn't happen. And the outgoing governor, Doug Ducey, called Hobbs to congratulate her. Recall that Ducey famously refused to answer a phone call from Trump when the former president was obsessed with fraud allegations. False fraud allegations, of course. Left with no other opinion, Lake finds herself in the awkward position of blaming her loss on an unusual culprit for election deniers, voter suppression. At the heart of her claim is that Maricopa County, the state's largest county and home to Phoenix, experienced some equipment failures and long lines on Election Day. There is no question that for some portion of the day, there were tabulation machine issues that resulted in long lines to vote, and it may be that some voters were sent to alternate voting locations. However unfortunate, this is not out of the ordinary in our elections. Long lines caused by insufficient or broken voting equipment is a tax usually paid by black, brown, and young voters. At the same time that voters in Maricopa County were waiting in 2-hour lines, students at the University of Michigan were enduring near-freezing temperatures during their 6-hour-long wait to cast their ballots. Indeed, past studies have revealed that it is often black voters, like students who are traditionally Democratic, who suffer the longest wait times to vote and experience the most frequent equipment failures. Yet, Republicans like Lake seldom have a sympathetic word for those voters. Indeed, big lie advocates are more likely to try to prevent voters waiting in long lines from being provided food and water than they are to decry the conditions these voters face. The only difference here is that Lake sees an advantage to using voters who experience the hardships of voting as pawns in her cynical effort to undermine the 2022 election. Thankfully, like Trump, her Hail Mary effort to prevent defeat is doomed to fail. In a recent video about her legal preparation, she told her supporters that she is assembling the best and brightest legal team. Given her track record, that seems doubtful. However, even if not the best and brightest, if her legal team is competent, they will tell her she's sure to suffer the same humiliating fate in court that Trump experienced 2 years ago. I suspect Lake knows this. It explains why so far she has mounted a pathetic public relations campaign rather than actually take legal action. It is too bad, though, because there is an opportunity to use this election as the basis to reform voting in Arizona to make it more accessible and easier to register and vote. But that would require an honest politician who genuinely cares about voting rights and a Republican Party that would support necessary reforms. Neither is the case in Arizona. Either way, Hobbs will make an excellent next governor of the state that you can count on. So, sure. Why not? I'll count on it. There's more from Arizona on a slightly different front. This from the Associated Press, I guess, originally, and advertised running in the local papers there. Which one? I don't know. It's one of these conglomerate and websites of, I think, several papers in Arizona. Cochise County, which I hope we're pronouncing correctly. That's the pronunciation we were using yesterday with Greg. The Cochise County Board delays certifying election results, and this is happening in a couple of places. Mark Elias already threatening, quite correctly, to sue those counties. They are in opposition to Arizona law, refusing to certify their election results because, like Kari Lake, they believe there was some weird, crazy anomaly that they can't quite explain that is obvious evidence of fraud, and so therefore we're not going to do our jobs and certify the results. So let's see. Who's the reporter here? Does it say? I don't know. They just credit AP. The board overseeing a southeastern Arizona county whose Republican leaders had hoped to recount all Election Day ballots on Friday delayed certifying the results of last week's vote after hearing from a trio of conspiracy theorists who alleged that counting machines were not certified. Were they? We'll see. The three men, or some combination of them, have filed at least 4 cases raising similar claims before the Arizona Supreme Court since 2021, seeking to have the state's 2020 election results thrown out. The court has dismissed all of them for lack of evidence, waiting too long after the election was certified, or asking for relief that could not be granted in increasingly harsh language. But Tom Rice, Brian Sterner, and Daniel Wood managed to persuade the 2 Republicans who control the Cochise County Board of Supervisors that their claims were valid enough for them to delay the certification until a November 28th deadline. Which, no big deal, but I guess if they, they'll be pressed then to violate the November 28th deadline as well. And it's happening in more and more counties, but this one's focusing on Cochise. They claim the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission allowed certifications for testing companies to lapse, and that voided the certifications of vote tabulation equipment used across the state. We heard a little bit about this yesterday. That came despite testimony from the state's election director that the machines and the testing company were indeed certified. The equipment used in Cochise County is properly certified under both federal and state laws and requirements. State Elections Director Corey Lorick, remember her, told the board the claims that the SLI testing labs were not properly accredited are false. Well, that would seem to settle things, but I guess not. The move is the latest drama in the Republican-heavy county in recent weeks, which started when GOP board members Tom Crosby and Peggy Judd voted to have all the ballots in last week's election counted by hand to determine if machine counts were accurate. And later they'll find out that they were accurate, more accurate than the hand counts that they do. Crosby also defended a lawsuit he and Judd filed against the county elections director earlier this week, seeking to force the hand count. They dropped the case against Lisa Mara on Wednesday. If our presenter's request is met by the proof that our machines are indeed legally and lawfully accredited, then indeed we should accept the results, Crosby said. However, if the machines have not been lawfully certified, then the converse is also true. Wow, chin stroker here. We cannot certify this election, or verify is what it says. We cannot verify, which maybe, is that a typo for verify? Or is that a cross between verify and certify? I don't know. New word. Crosby and Judd then voted to delay certification, with Crosby saying he believed Wood, Steiner, and Rice needed to be provided proof since they were the experts. But they should be the ones that come up with the proof, don't you think? Democratic Supervisor Ann English was powerless to overrule them. The delay potentially jeopardizes state certification set for December 5th and at least one statewide recount. Lorick issued a statement after the vote vowing legal action to force the board to accept the results. Under Arizona law, the formal election canvass can't be changed by the elected county boards. Their only role is to accept the numbers as they are tallied by their elections departments. If they fail to do so, the Secretary of State will use all available legal remedies to compel compliance with Arizona law and protect Cochise County voters' rights to have their votes counted, Lorick said. All 15 Arizona counties face the same November 28th deadline. but there is no sign others are considering similar defiance. I think there actually is such a sign now. Maybe it cropped up after this article went to publication. Once the state certifies the results on December 5th, there will be a recount in at least one statewide race. That contest between Republican Abraham Hamada and Democrat Chris Mays, another K, Chris Mays, for Attorney General is so close that a recount is certain. As of Friday night, Mays was less than 600 votes ahead, with fewer ballots remaining to be counted than the margin for a mandatory recount, which will be about 12,500 votes. It's going to be close, and every vote matters, Mays said in a brief interview, and obviously we've headed into a recount one way or the other. I'm way behind, I think, in doing the outro thing. We'll roll it with apologies to Justice Putnam for delaying the start of his West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next year to take you into the day before Thanksgiving festivities. All right, well, that's about the end here. One other statewide race is also within the margin for recount, but incumbent Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kathy, with a K, Hoffman, they're really doing it up in Arizona, conceded to Republican Tom Horn on Thursday. That sounds too bad. Horn is a former schools chief who served 2 years as Attorney General before losing the 2014 primary. He was more than 9,000 votes ahead on Friday. And of course, Horn criticized Hoffman for embracing progressive teaching and promised to shut down any hint of critical race theory, which is not taught in state schools, but is a hot button issue for social conservatives. I guess they'll finally be getting rid of those litter boxes too. Anyway, so that's where we stand. I had seen, I thought, reports on Twitter that there are more counties where more Republican-controlled boards were going to try and do the same thing. I hope that turns out not to be true, but there you have it. And that's where we stand in Arizona. The kooks still threatening in every way possible. There just aren't a lot of ways possible. Okay, what's up on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Some hint of that here. Trump's biggest loss in the Supreme Court is just the beginning. Let's find out what that's about next, right here.
From netrootsradio.com.
That's the place where you'll find out.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
How about this? Severe drought in Hawaii is fueling rare November wildfire warnings. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has no intentions of resigning after being threatened by the Congressional Insurgent Caucus, and Miami-Dade County asked the federal bankruptcy court for permission to immediately remove the FTX name from the Miami Heat arena. Next.